Morning, Kishan.
Morning, parts.
So this week we're going to discuss software modernization and the future of the SaaS industry. Some articles came around, for example, from the Financial Times, saying that the stocks really are in decline. As you can see, also in general in the indices of the S&P 500, software and services are really doing bad. Specifically, the AI tools that came about as, for example, Cloud Code with the COBOL focus really shock the stock market. So we're going to talk a bit about what the reasons are and why the investors are getting shy of these stocks. They're betting on that generative AI is disrupting the capital light software businesses. So expecting that they go from like a massive buying route, the organizations that used to buy SaaS products now might be able to build highly custom internal tools. Perspective that you have on the AI tools and their capabilities. What are your first thoughts on the Financial Times article? Is it uninformed fear of the investors, or is there some truth in there?
I think there's some truth in there. I mean, there are, of course, things an AI model can help developers with or companies with to investigate or clarify or give them more of a background on how to do certain things. Because as we talked about before, SaaS tools make you conform to their way of doing things. If you implement any SaaS tool, you have to conform to the way the SaaS tool basically works. You have to model your company and your processes towards that, whatever you want to implement. And right now, you can see that the focus is shifting a little bit, and it's empowering internal development teams to maybe phase out some of these tools because they can more easily set up these tools specialized towards their own internal processes. So there is some truth there. I mean, it's not a one size fits all. Everyone can do everything now just because there is an LLM that can understand code better than it could before, but it helps out certain teams for sure.
Going into a bit of detail on the specific case, this was the case where the investors were shocked. AI helps break the cost barrier to COBOL modernization. They have a nice article about how Claude is helping modernize the systems. A lot of other articles, this one in specific. This article was really good about giving a perspective on the investment or the stock decline and what is actually happening and how difficult it is to modernize a mainframe. Okay, you can maybe have some assistance, like we already talked a bit about before, have some assistance with writing the code or modernizing the code, but of course, you need to do migrations, replacing middleware, re-engineering integration points. Can you give some perspective on the actual work that needs to be done and the work that might become more efficient with the LLMs? And give your honest opinion, just be critical, of course, about this.
So the articles and the fear right now is mostly around IBM's main bread and butter, which is keeping these mainframes maintained and up to, because it's a big backbone of a lot of financial institutions. I'm not old enough to know, of course, and works on the mainframe, but I've studied computer science, so I know the background behind these things. The thing is that banks were one of the first movers into technology back in the day. They were one of the most innovative and most adopting the technology because transaction management a lot easier. The processing of transactions was done manually before, and then the more technology moved towards automation, the more the banks jumped to, hey, we can automate transaction processing and management for the whole world. So they jumped on investing in these mainframes, investing into programming. COBOL was back in the day the language to do this in. And a lot of transaction, the banking backbone has been built on COBOL, and it still runs. So they did a very good job in actually implementing these things, because our whole financial system, the deeper you go, the more you go into the actual foundation, which is what was built all these years ago. So that being said, it is not just a lift and shift thing. You cannot just re-implement those financial systems into a different language and be done with it. It's because it has been working for so long, since I think 60s to 70s. These things have been built into a giant ecosystem of interconnected systems, but also purpose-built databases, purpose-built systems for interfacing with these transaction processing systems, but also interface with the machines. It is not as simple as, hey, take these lines of COBOL, transition them into Java or C Sharp, Python, whatever, and be done with it, because that would only replace a script. But the script doesn't do everything. The script is just a piece of code that runs. The more important things happen with the interconnectivity of the entire system, which might not be built in COBOL, might be built in a different language, might be built in a different mainframe, might be built on top of a giant different system that is not exposed right now. So it is a way of looking at things. Hey, we can translate this old stuff into this new stuff, which is true. And LLM can also translate Dutch into English or English into Japanese. It can do that. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The whole story is that the whole ecosystem that it's built and maintained up until this day would need to be transitioned into something new before that can actually make sense. So all that being said, might help the current mainframe maintainers that IBM has to do that work more efficiently, or might help them understand work that has been done years ago better. But even if they would think that it would need to be migrated to something else, that doesn't work that way, because there would need to be a new system that does all these different things surrounding just transaction processing before it can be shifted to that modernized system. So it is an interesting take. And of course, most market makers, in the sense, would jump at the conclusion that, hey, we could not pay these big companies with these very expensive experts, old school developers to maintain these systems. But either way you look at it, they would still be needed to interpret if the transitions are going well, interpret whether the code that's being written does actually what it needs to do. Because you and I, for example, would get all this mainframe code, put it through an LLM, and if you'd say, hey, I did my job, it's okay now, we wouldn't know what we were looking
at. So, in a sense, of course, the question might be, do you want to keep the COBOL mainframes forever, or do you need to replace them somewhere in the near future? That is also a key question, of course, to maybe you can build everything around it, or would you have like an argument against that?
The problem, nobody teaches COBOL anymore, right? So the problem is not that the code doesn't work. The problem is that the amount of people that actually know what's happening inside of the system just gets lower and lower. We are talking about like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Those people are going into retirement or doing something else completely. So the group that actually knows these intricacies won't exist anymore in 20 years. So it would be necessary to have either some kind of LLM AI. No, I wouldn't be the problem LLM. LLM wouldn't be able to do this. There would need to be some kind of AI that we could completely rely upon to understand this completely and maintain it for you. Then we wouldn't need to change anything, because the system would maintain itself. I don't see that happening in the near future, but that would be an option. Or there would need to be a giant effort to transition this into a language where there is a great enough group of people that can maintain it. Because the problem is not that it doesn't work. It works perfectly fine. Hundreds of millions of transactions are going through. The problem is just the people that can actually maintain these mainframes, they don't exist anymore.
Well, if there's a market for it, in the sense of if people or companies will pay you to maintain it, probably there will be people that are going to specialize again in COBOL, right?
Yes, but the group is just getting so much lower, because the current developers can also do something that is modern, something that is on the cutting edge of technology. You have to make a conscious choice to learn an older language for yourself and make that your career. And especially with the way technology is growing right now and the things that are changing in the landscape, the group that makes that conscious choice is just going to get very small. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be the case, but you see it right now. the younger generation of developers rather goes for something where they have more freedom or more free time, where they automate a lot of stuff and they don't have to go to the office. You don't have a choice. You cannot develop for a mainframe if you don't go to the office. It doesn't work
Right.
that way.
Got it. Just a sidestep, but what if you would want to learn COBOL? How long would it take for you to, like, as a senior architect and developer or engineer, how much time would you need?
It's a whole different paradigm of developing. So right now, the languages we get taught nowadays, even in universities, we mostly teach either C#, C++, Java. They are much higher level languages where C is lower level of the bunch, but they are still abstracting so much stuff for you that makes developer experience a lot better. And COBOL doesn't have it. It's much more closer to the assembly language where it jumps from one point to another, has pointers that points to one piece of code in somewhere else across the system. Right now, we just call functions and we don't really care on a memory level or on an execution level where that ends up. That all gets interpreted for us. So you would need to change the way you think about development if you are just taught object-oriented or the higher level languages we use now to make our own lives easier. It's just a lot more verbose in what you need to do.
And I can imagine that you also need a sort of apprenticeship from an expert. You cannot just start working on it.
You can start working on it like anything. You can teach it yourself, but the intricacy you wouldn't know unless you get taught those intricacies. Because you can teach yourself reading COBOL and writing COBOL, but running it without using a VN or some kind of virtualization layer or some kind of virtual interpreter, you would need to upload it to an actual physical mainframe to see if it works the way you think it works. Because there are also different types of mainframes, right? It's not just one type that does everything. You would need access to all these things that you don't have access to right now.
Let's go back to the articles. I think it ties into a bit of the question comes to my mind every time when I see things like this. Also, this is a bit older, as the CEO of Microsoft mentioned, I think in December already, that the traditional SaaS model is going away. There is a database and then AI agents that then service you with anything that you would want to see. So you don't have the traditional SaaS anymore. I think that also ties into the whole modernization, obviously. So you either have legacy software that you can replace with an existing SaaS solution. You have legacy software and you want to rebuild it yourself or build something yourself, like a customized application. You have many different flavors in that. But what I'm missing a bit in the whole discussion, and definitely from a return on investment perspective, and I'm curious to see what take you have on that. If there is a modernization question inside an organization where a CEO and a CTO together want to modernize the application or the infrastructure of the organization, is it not that we need to have a very well-informed decision on the return on investment when choosing for like a customized application, like something that you built yourself, because you don't only have the development cost of that application that you need to pay for, but you also have the maintenance and everything that comes after that. You don't have security and patches and that stuff that you need to be doing yourself. On the other hand, obviously, you have the possible missing opportunities and possible missing returns because you didn't do the updating or modernization of your software. What's your take on the return on investment and how do you look at that? Like from a technical, of course, you're a technical guy, so always look at like complex problems and making solutions. But what about the return on investment?
So you make an important point there. It's not just creating a new application or a new system and be done with it. It needs to be maintained. So even if in the best case scenario, the cost or the return on investment is one-on-one, either you implement a SaaS solution or do everything yourself using AI. I think the most important question is you have full accountability if something goes wrong. The AI doesn't take any accountability. You cannot blame an AI. It's a company that you buy a SaaS solution from has an SLA, like every one of them has. If your system is down or something happens with your system, you have somebody to hold accountable. If you do everything yourself, who are you gonna keep accountable if something goes wrong? Because the AI is just gonna say, hey, I'm sorry, let's fix this. But the problem is still there. And then you would need to also have the people that know that something as well and know what the fix would actually resolve the issue. And that is an additional cost that nobody really talks about. If right now I implement a SaaS provider for authentication solutions, if something happens where an unauthorized user can get access to that system, I can point the finger at them, hey, you guys in your SLA, you said this and this, and these are our agreements with each other to who has access and who doesn't have access. I can have a legal standpoint to get my losses, or at least have some kind of financial compensation for what happens and what went wrong. If we do everything ourselves using AI, the AI is not going to pay you back. And issues happen, mistakes happen, hallucinations happen, things get removed, things get deleted, things get implemented in the wrong way. And also, if you do these things using AI, and in the best case scenario, you have a developer or a team of developers that creates these things using AI, there's a lot less understanding happening when an AI writes code and somebody needs to review it. Because if an AI agent or a group of agents build a system for you with 100 different files, reviewing those will be a chore. And also reviewing those by a team of developers, it will be more probable that they will miss something than if they co-write it or have written it themselves, because their mind is working on having a understanding of the system instead of reading it. If somebody reads a book to you, your understanding of what's happening is a lot less than if you read it yourself. And that's what's happening with AI generated applications as well. Somebody's just doing the work for you and you have to review it. Reviewing somebody else's work is a lot more prone to have issues in there than doing it yourself and seeing.
I think in the near future, companies like Eli 5 or the agencies, the software development agencies and studios will have, with the senior developers, they go faster with, or most of the time go faster with LLM support, or at least have a sort of like a colleague, as you mentioned before. But I still see, the question is, when a company, like an organization, has an idea to build a custom application as an internal tool and then sort of vibe codes that, all kinds of trouble can arise depending on who does that, obviously. But we already seen in like our architecture and application review service coming, like, some of the tools that came by really were not enterprise grade, right? And you
Yes.
don't want to have that running in the wild, so to speak. So maybe a question in the direction of, you have a legacy system, the return on investment is questionable, as might come from an analysis of like the CEO or CTO. The investment is 300K, for example. We're not sure if we want to do that to modernize the system, to build it custom again. Would it be an idea that you have the legacy system and you have a wrapper around it, a modernization wrapper, so to speak, as a validation strategy to have maybe a complete rebuild later, but you can already prove with the, I think it would be cheaper, right, to build a wrapper around it. But suppose you build a wrapper around the legacy system and then use that as a validation to see if you have that application with modern features or modern UX, that you then demonstrate the return on investment and then might go for a potential rebuild later, or you might just keep that as is. What's your take on that?
It's actually a good strategy for delivering value to end customers as quickly as possible, because it's the simplest way to keep everything in place. But the answer is, like always, it depends whether the system can support a wrapper or not. If you go back to the whole COBOL thing, that doesn't work that way. But if it's a legacy system that exposes a certain database, and you wrap your functions around that, right now a user needs to do 20 clicks because of the database layer only supporting it one by one. And we wrap all these things around it to make a user do the same actions in one click, and we make it opaque for them that we are doing 20 things in the background. Those are the kinds of things you can create to make things a lot more user-friendly for your end customer. So yes, it makes sense to do it that way, but it also only makes sense if the use case supports that, but also the system in the background supports that. If a legacy system doesn't have certain capability, but also doesn't have support to expose the information you need, there's no way a wrapper is going to fix that, because you don't have the core information. But if it has the information just fragmented or scattered, but you can collect that in a wrapper layer around that to give your user a better user experience, that's it's the best way to show value, and also the simplest way that we at Innovyte do things to develop these types of user experience upgrades.
And in any case, I would assume that you need to have an infrastructure and application review to be able to determine what would be possible, right?
Definitely. That's the prerequisite. We need to know what the landscape looks like at the status quo before we can say anything about this. So that's also an entry point for us to use AI or LLM powered tools to map that for us while we are doing our actual investigation ourselves.
And I think that is after doing the analysis, we also come up with possible ways or future proofing the application and the infrastructure. And this might then be one of them, obviously, right?
Definitely.
I want to go to the last article, which is actually a LinkedIn post of the CEO of Odoo. He had some interesting things on his LinkedIn this week where he sort of promotes the vibe coding, which I'm not sure if that is the right way to go, but it is an interesting take on how to build customized SaaS products, or at least it's not a SaaS product anymore, then it's like a customized internal tool. What he says is you have a world-class app, a base system, so to speak, accounting or CRM or HR, and then connecting with Cloud Code, it can ship custom features for your organization. So you can actually build the customized application for your organization using the base layer, and then with Cloud Code, coming up with new features, customized features. And even then, by Nondevs, I suppose that would be the meaning of vibe coding. What is your take on this idea in a basic sense, but also, do you see this happening? Is this a way to go forward?
Well, those are two different questions. So do I think this is the way to go forward, especially as a platform that markets itself as a replacement ERP? No, because there's way too many things that can go wrong, especially it's the term vibe coding is you don't check anything, you just ship whatever it puts out there, which is a security risk. Just thinking about it, this is a security risk. But systems like this work similar to the old school WordPress days, right? You have one platform that's the base layer. You have these different apps, they call it apps, that you can enable. And you have an ecosystem of plugins where you can extend certain functionalities of this base platform and apps. Similar, you can of course create these plugins using vibe coding to add functionalities that you want on top of the apps that are in the system. So, for example, if your CIM doesn't have certain fields or certain search functionalities built in the current base app that Odoo serves, you can create a plugin for that. I'm just not sure if any non-developer that knows how to give correct boundaries to plugins should just vibe code this, because you can imagine if I add a functionality vibe coded with a plugin, I can also expose information using that plugin. And that's something you just don't want to do.
So in a sense, if I then summarize what you just said, that could be a good idea to use. WordPress was also super popular back in the day, might be still, but I think a lot of people earn a lot of money on servicing or building plugins and templates and all kinds of stuff. It might be a direction where an open source platform like Odoo makes it possible to make your own plugins and templates, and then even have the commercial layer around that for the companies like Eli5, like the engineers could build applications and plugins for that platform and then just earn money like that. Would that be a direction that the enterprise applications could go in, or do you think that's viable?
Odoo already supports all this, right? So there is an ecosystem of plugins right now that you can either get for free or buy. The thing is that they did right now is just to integrate it into their own platform, so you don't have to go to the marketplace to get them. So nothing really changes from that perspective. It just exposes it to non-technical people that didn't have these tools on their machine because they built it into the platform. So nothing really changes from that perspective. It just exposes it to more people. Though I think it's a good idea, as I said, no, the problem still remains the same. If you have non-technical people doing these things, the attack factor is just too great to expose things that you don't want to expose, and you don't know that you're exposing them. Google has these API keys that they told people to use for Google Maps plugins. Everyone can just create a Google Maps plugin API key and put maps on your website. if that same user also enables Gemini to do whatever with on the same account, these public Google Maps keys also expose your Gemini tools. So what happens right now is that there are people that have a personal website that uses Google Maps for whatever reason, and maybe just to show a map of where their headquarters is. And if they enable their Gemini capabilities or AI capabilities from Google for that same account, everyone can use that key to either wrap up tokens on their account, or access any files they uploaded, which is a giant security risk. Normally, a developer with a security mindset would scope these keys to do only the things they want to expose. But since they made it so simple, just click these 2 buttons and it's done. For non-developers to add Google Maps to your website makes these things a lot more exposed. So that's the thing. What I'm trying to say is that making these things available for non-technical people by just doing a few clicks, it exposes a lot of things that they don't even actually know about or might not need to know about in the past.
I suppose like with most of the things in life, if you don't know what you're doing, that could cause trouble. In this case also, but the gap closes, I think, on software development in the sense of like the black box that the software developer was at least 5 to 10 to 20 years ago now is opened a bit with these tools, but still it has so much details and things you need to know to do it, like to embed something safely or to build something in the right way. So I suppose there will be a lot more work for senior software developers and security people in the near future.
Software developers never really had a problem with writing code. It is giving that code boundaries of the systems that they need to communicate with or the security risk that they want to expose or not. That's the things they actually need to think about and how to make it work the way they want it to work, not writing the code, which is what the LLM does. It can write the code for you, but that's never been the problem, writing the code. It's thinking about all these things around the code that make it work.
And when that comes, the LLM that is able to do that, then we are the first to discuss that probably in the next article round, right?
Yeah, but I don't think an LLM will be able to do it. It would actually have to be some intelligence behind it to make these decisions for you instead of predicting words.
So with the modernization strategy, you could also wait for the artificial general intelligence to help you.
If that actually comes, yes.
Okay, thank you for your time, Bishan.
Thanks.